The story about the heroes who prevented the attack in the Dallas train attack, and the movie itself is not really that impressive. For one, the main leads, who are played by the actual heroes, need more acting lessons. The story is such a slog to go through, and the only great part about the movie is the train attack itself, but even then, it's short. Oh no, this is not one of Clint Eastwood's best films. A film that everyone's making a big deal out of, that Black Panther film is really good. It has great characters, the world of Wakanda is amazing, and here is a fantastic antagonist that a lot of MCU films kind of suffer. Overall, a great film to watch. Oh, well, please stop overhyping this as the first black superhero film, otherwise you'll deal with this guy. I never heard of this movie before, so I chose this over the other new American movies that were released recently. And I like it. The comedy's really nice. And that's about it. The rest of it is just plainly average. If you don't have really anything else to watch other than the new movies that were out recently, then go watch this. It's pretty funny. Despite this film coming out at a bad time, 2018's Death Wish is thoroughly entertaining. I like the main character, he's smart. The social commentary actually shows the pros and cons of what he's doing. And I think the writing is actually pretty good despite being pretty simple. Well, I'm not sure if this is as good as the original Death Wish. I enjoyed this film very much. I really don't have much to say about this movie other than that it kind of sucks. The comedy is not funny. It's very serious, actually. And despite the actors giving it all, it does not save them from an overall dull plot. Avoid this movie. Admittedly, I've only watched the Angelina Jolie movies and never played any of the games, including the rebooted ones. But this Tomb Raider movie, I actually kind of like it. I enjoy Alicia Vikander as Lara Croft. I like the tomb they're going after, and I enjoy the chemistry between Lara Croft and other characters I won't spoil. There are problems like the villain is just boring and sequel baiting, but I like it overall. While it is a step down from the first movie, Pacific Rim Uprising still delivers with its giant monsters versus giant robots arena fighting movies. If you enjoy those type of movies like the previous one, you will enjoy this one, despite some of the flaws like characters and writing. Go watch it if you enjoy this stuff. I was initially worried that this film would be just nothing more than pop culture and video game references and Easter eggs, but this is actually a really great film, especially this coming from Steven Spielberg, with an interesting theme, great cinematography, at least for me, considering the past movies I've seen, and a great looking world to be in, like the Oasis and what I'm talking about. Go watch this film, especially if you're a gamer. This film has Wes Anderson style all over it due to its visual and cinematography style. On its own, this film's not bad. It's about a kid who has to find his dog and assisting with other dogs in an island full of trash because the Japanese government banished these dogs up due to their disease. It is a fine and pretty funny film at times. I prefer if it sticks more onto the dogs' times instead of the Japanese area, but overall I like it. Honestly, I don't really have much to say about this movie. The third act is very appealing and it has a lot of fun and action. And that's about it. The rest of the movie is pretty forgettable. If you want all the fun and monster fighting, the third act of this movie is worth it. Otherwise, just wait until Avengers Infinity War. I'm not going to talk about the politics or the accuracy of this film. I'm just going to talk about this film in general. With that said, this is one of the best films I have ever seen. With an interesting protagonist, an interesting story, and fantastic direction, this is a film I recommend for many people. Unless if you're that picky with the politics and accuracy of the event that happened, but otherwise, go watch it. After 10 years of build-up, Avengers Infinity War is by far Marvel Studios' most ambitious film yet, and it is done very well. I cannot spoil it because I want you guys to experience it for yourself. But let's just say this is a film that every MCU fan will enjoy. Newcomers, unfortunately, will not be as much. Go watch it, true believers. It's a slow week for movies this week, so I'm gonna review a movie that was out in February, and it's apparently out on Blu-ray right now. Peter Rabbit. On its own, it's an okay movie that children will like, but on a movie that is based off of Beatrix Potter's work, there's a lot left to be desired. It's okay, but nothing worth watching for. Deadpool is still as funny as ever with his fourth wall breaking humor and a lot of dirty comedy as well. That being said, I did not enjoy this movie as much as the first one with its poorly structured plot and really uninteresting story. I just couldn't get myself to like this one. So, unless if you're a hardcore fan, this is a skip. Please don't kill me, Deadpool. This is just disappointing. For those who really are curious, the Alden, he did fine as young Han Solo, but even then, the movie is just so boring. Nothing about it is interesting other than a couple of good, cool moments. But other than that, this just really isn't a Star Wars movie at all. It's just sci-fi dressed up as Star Wars. A romance drama about a couple stuck in the sea is kind of interesting, and that sequence where they adrift is not bad at all. But when the constant flashbacks of how they met and fell in love with each other, while okay, is distracting. Overall, this movie is okay. Not bad at all. There are better movies, but I like this. I really like the idea of a hospital that only takes in criminals, but unfortunately this movie is just pretty boring. The robbery and the climax are the most interesting parts of the movie, and maybe arguably Jodie Foster. The rest, however, doesn't really hold up with its bland characters and writing. Don't really recommend much about this one. I loved the first Incredibles when I was young, and Incredibles 2 is just as great, even though it has some flaws. The animation is great, as expected by Pixar. The story about family is still good, and it is a just all-around fun action ride. Go watch it if you love the first Incredibles. As for the short animated film Bao, it is sweet despite the lowest point being a little disturbing. I like the first Jurassic World despite its flaws, but there's no way I like this one. The writing is all over the place. They reuse a certain plot point from the last movie that was stupid to begin with. Characters are annoying, even if Chris Pratt tried his best. And honestly, they're trying to make dinosaurs look like good people despite the fact they are very threatening. Skip this. It's not even worth the wait. I remember watching the first Sicario years ago and remember liking it despite not being my preferred type of film. The sequel, on the other hand, doesn't do as well as the first one. The slow pacing has some hindrances at times. The plot is slightly confusing at times too, and overall the story is not as interesting. If you're a fan of the first Sicario, this will be fine by you. While we wait for the inevitable Avengers 4, we have two films to wait for in the MCU. This one being Ant-Man and the Wasp. And I gotta say it is a step up from the first Ant-Man. Not only is he still funny, but it's also entertaining. The quantum realm is actually pretty interesting, and the characters got better from the last film. It may not be perfect, but this still is a great movie. This is just an odd concept to begin with. A bunch of friends that play a childhood game of tag every May, even up to their adult years. It's just weird. Yet it somehow works. This is a very entertaining and funny film I have ever seen so far. If you want something that can cheer you up and with a great theme of friendship, I totally recommend this film. Go watch it. I normally don't review documentaries, so I'm gonna review this as more of a personal, how I personally feel instead of professionally reviewing it. I thought this is probably one of the most heartwarming documentaries I ever seen about a man who has such a huge impact on so many people, especially children in an entertainment industry. I can't describe him enough. Go watch it, especially if you're a fan of Mr. Roger. This movie has an interesting idea of an amputated FBI agent trying to save his family from a bunch of terrorists in a burning building. But that sounds a little bit too much for about Die Hard. And even then, there are some things that are problematic, like the characters are not very interesting, and this movie's kind of predictable. Overall, if you still want some action, this will do for now, but there are better. I remember watching the first Equalizer 4 years ago, and remember liking it, and not much after that. With its sequel, I admit I like this one too, but acknowledges seriously many flaws. Like, the main plot is just overcome with the subplot, the villain's motivation is dumb, and as much as I like Denzel Washington, his character's invincible. Cannot really recommend it. If you've been following the Mission Impossible film series, you know it is well known for its great action, and this one doesn't disappoint. Despite its basic plot, it actually gives a little bit of an interesting new addition by exploring more of Ethan's psyche. Overall, it is still a fun action flick, and I do recommend it for everyone, especially action fans. Now that's a face only a mother can love. The question of whether the audience is going to like this movie or not is up to them, of course, but as the trailer goes, this is not bad. An improvement. Still concerned due to the fact that the tone is kind of mixed, but overall I'm still excited of this somewhat part of the MCU. I hope it is good. A man spends his time working to help his family instead of being with his family until his past comes in and reminds him of the fun times they had when he was a child. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, Christopher Robin pretty much did the same thing like any other movies that did this before, but better. Like, on the top of my head, Heart and Souls. This movie is fine, but you've pretty much seen this movie before. It's a movie about a giant shark. What do you expect you're gonna see? It doesn't really add anything new to the shark formula. There are a few things they try, like some drama to it, but it just ends up having a mixed bag. Overall, if you want a movie about a giant shark eating people, you're gonna get it. Crazy Rich Asians remind me of two films, My Big Fat Greek Wedding and Father of the Bride. And I love this film more for it. It just loves to make not only Asian culture but also upper class culture as well. Although I kind of wish they explored the family a bit more, I do enjoy how the main character Rachel has to deal with the upper class family. I recommend it for everyone. Ugh. Not even Mark Wahlberg or the guy from The Ray can save this movie from being trash. Nothing about this movie is interesting other than the action scenes, but even then, the editing and the cinematography is not doing it much favor. I say just skip this movie entirely, and if you're curious for the action scenes, just wait for it when it comes out on Blu-ray and when it's posted on videos on YouTube. I really enjoyed this film. It has a very unique narrative storytelling via webcams and phones and newsreels, despite the fact that it's kind of been done before in Unfriended. It is an interesting mystery, despite that I can guess who the key clue is to solving this mystery. But it's overall a fantastic film that I recommend to everyone, especially film enthusiasts. I believe Jennifer Garner has proven that she can be an action hero in her own right. Although this movie reminds me way too much of the Marvel Netflix series Punisher, or just Punisher himself. That being said, this movie's alright. It has some pretty good action scenes, but there are some problems, like there are areas where I kind of find hard to believe. But if you want a good action movie, this will do just fine. I've always been a fan of the Predator creature because he looks so cool, is a lot more intelligent than the alien xenomorph, and is geared up for, well, hunting. As for the movie itself, it seems like a butchered version of the Predator creature itself. There's some humor that is funny, but it just doesn't fit into the more serious tone of the Predator. There's some fast-pacing issues and many others. I don't exactly recommend this. I like Kevin Hart. He's a funny guy. I just don't like most of the movies I've seen with him. This one's not gonna make me change my mind. Depending on your taste, it is funny and it has a good plot, but that's about it. If you like Kevin Hart, I think you'll have some enjoyment for this movie. I still prefer Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle, though. If Venom is really part of the MCU, I would consider this movie one of the worst ones. It is not good, with writing that is very poor, tone that is very inconsistent, and even action that is problematic. I don't recommend this to anyone, even Marvel fans. If there's one thing I would give it to it, at least Venom looks awesome. Oh boy. Ignoring how I feel about abortions in general, this movie's actually not bad, but not amazing though. It does show an interesting exploration of how abortions work, and while this movie can be a little preachy at times, it's not as bad as saying like any Christian movie ever made. I do recommend for anyone to watch this, even if they have their own opinions on abortions. I've only seen the first Johnny English when I was a kid, and I remember enjoying it. But watching this one, I can't say it's actually great. There are a few good jokes here and there, but story structure-wise, it's not good. And it's also very predictable. I don't really recommend this to anyone. Not really. So, hey guys, have you seen Oz the Great and Powerful, the Chronicles of Narnia movies, or any of the live-action Alice in Wonderland movies? Then you've pretty much seen this movie as well. Except the problem is, nothing is interesting about them. The characters are not interesting. The world looks good, I guess, but overall, it's just not a good movie. Don't recommend it at all. I'm deeply puzzled. On the one hand, nobody was really asking for a live-action Pokemon movie. On the other hand, this trailer itself actually looks kind of good. But as this picture that you see here, it can be a make-or-break movie. I hope for the best, but I'm preparing for the worst. Where do I begin with this movie? The few good things I would say about it is that the visuals are nice, the mystical creatures look good, and some of the actors are trying. But man, is the writing so poor, with so many subplots and characters in this movie crammed together as though it were a book, except this is a 2-hour movie, and it just doesn't work. Both average viewers and Harry Potter fans will hate this. I love the Rocky Balboa franchise, and with the first Creed, I enjoyed that as a welcome new addition and introduction to the series. This run, its sequel, does not disappoint. While it is pretty formulaic and kind of predictable, it is executed very well. If you love Rocky and boxing films in general, go watch this. I've been hearing a lot of good things about this film, so I finally have a chance to watch it. Well, the one disadvantage for me is that I am not a fan of heist films, and this is a heist film, so it doesn't help. I will give that the character arcs are really good, and I do like the direction. It's just that this film is a little too long, and a lot of scenes are unnecessary. Good film, I just don't want to watch it again. It's very interesting we have now an MCU Spider-Man, a Venom film, and suddenly an animated Spider-Man film. And this is a really good Spider-Man film too. It pays great tribute to the Spider-Man as a character and as an icon, and it has an interesting story of how Miles Morales grows as Spider-Man. I definitely recommend it. despite some animations that could be a problem. The DCEU really needs to get their act together after the so-called, limiting success of the Justice League. And so they come up with Aquaman. And it's good. I wouldn't say it's as good as Wonder Woman, but there are some things that are to be enjoyable about it. Though with the overfilling of CG and sloppy and rushed second act, they do need to work on it a little more. Step in the right direction though. This film is a Christmas miracle. With all the terrible Transformers movies that was made back in 2007, it's amazing they actually made a good Transformers film with Bumblebee. There are characters we can actually care for, the CG is not all over the place, and the action is actually quite enjoyable. I consider this as the Iron Giant of Transformers. Go watch it. I liked the first Wreck-It Ralph. It was enjoyable and fun. Ralph Breaks the Internet, it's not as good as the first. Not terrible by any means, but I think the main problem I found with this movie is that it kind of spends more time exploring the world of the internet instead of, exploring the narrative. It's cool and all, but I kind of expected more. I remember loving Mary Poppins when I was young, so I'm a little excited to have Mary Poppins Returns coming in. And I hate to say this, but this is just disappointingly underwhelming. While Emily Blunt as Mary Poppins is cool and gives her own take, I can't really say the same thing about the narrative because it tries to copy from the original while doing its own thing, but doesn't do as well. Skip this. It's kind of surprising to me that Kevin Hart can actually be dramatic if he can. And he and Bryan Cranston makes this movie really good at most of the time. Though there are some flaws in the writing and some of how the characters go to their lowest points I just don't buy. But overall, not a bad way to start 2019. Having Shyamalan managing to have a crossover between Unbreakable and Split is interesting. Two of his better works. And I have to say it's kind of underwhelming. There are plenty of good parts in this movie, but I would say it kind of gets ruined when it reaches the finale. Not bad, but kind of wasted potential. I was never planning to watch this movie anytime soon, but my aunt was visiting, so I might as well go watch this. And I surprisingly like this. The biggest standout for me are the two sisters, and the love triangle is interesting, even though it leads to a typical lowest point for them. But overall, if you love rom-coms, you'll love this. I really loved the first Lego movie. I thought it was great and all. But for the sequel, I thought it was good too. Though it was unfortunately a step down like a lot of sequels are. It has great animation, some of the jokes are still funny, and it has a good story that may not be as deep as the first, but is still great overall. I say go watch it if you're a fan of the first one. Oh my word. I'm pretty excited for this Alita Battle Angel, which is based off a Japanese manga. And it's alright. There are issues like Alita's eyes can cross the uncanny valley at times. The screenplay is unfocused, and the romance between her and Hugo is just weak. Not awful, but not impressed. I'll admit, I'm not a wrestling person. I barely know much about it. But after watching this film, I actually find wrestling to be kind of intriguing. And the film itself is actually good too. Especially how the two siblings reacted to, the results of going into the WWE. And overall, it's a great film for everybody, including non-wrestling fans. Go watch it. The Rock's in it. With how much the news about how this movie got delayed so much and how the test audience didn't like it, I don't really have much confidence in this movie. The trailer looks good overall, but
I don't know. It the the reactions from the test audience doesn't give me much confidence. For their sake, I hope it's good. Otherwise, I'll leave it to Marvel to fix this. While I don't really follow the How to Train Your Dragon universe especially well, I do understand its appeal. And this one is no exception. I do like this film. There are some issues I have with it, such how the pacing goes on a little too fast in my eyes, but the animation is so spectacular, it's I might as well consider it live action. Go watch it, especially if you're a fan. Ignoring this big culture war about this movie, I'll be honest, this is just a disappointment. I can sense potential with Brie Larson, but she just gives such an underwhelming performance that is so really distracting. Doesn't help that the story's not great either, so is the production level. The only reason I would watch this is to hype up for Avengers Endgame. That's much better. Now the question is this movie gonna be as good as the original? I highly doubt that, but I was thinking there'll be some entertaining moments nonetheless. We'll see. I really don't have much to say about this movie. It's alright. There's some good shots I like, and the main plot is an interesting idea, but honestly, the rest of it, how it's executed, and many the subplots and their conclusions, just doesn't click to me. If you're one foreign films, this is fine by me, but they're better. Most of the DCEU doesn't really have that great movies. Wonder Woman and Aquaman are probably the only ones that are good. Though some argue Aquaman's not great. But for Shazam, this film is just awesome. The characters are great, the writing's great, especially its themes. It's just an awesome film and fun and very lighthearted. Exceptions are like the villains, some of the writing are problematic, but this is a great film to watch. Not growing up with the original animated film that much, I thought this Dumbo live action reboot, I thought it was fine. I like the Dumbo character, he's very adorable, but the rest of the characters I don't care much for, except especially with the terrible child actors. The antagonist is not needed, and I think Tim Burton is just the wrong director for this due to his style. I think children will love this more than adults. This is not going to be controversial or anything. I'll give PureFlix this. They had the guts to actually bother to discuss about abortions in this film. And I think it did pretty well. There's some flaws about this film. It's a Christian film, what do you expect? But I think they did their best as much as they could. Doubt it'll change the people who are on the other side, but I think they did well. This is nowhere as interesting as Guillermo del Toro's original versions. The character Hellboy, I don't even like him compared to the original. And he's supposed to be a prick, I know, but he's nowhere as likable. The other characters nowhere as interesting. The story is just a mess. The editing and pacing is just a mess. A lot of this movie is just a mess. Just watch the original Del Toro movies, not this one. I really don't have much to say about this movie. Production-wise, it's better than any of the Christian movies, but everything else, from the writing to the character arcs to a slightly preachy Christian message, it still has the problems of any other Christian movies ever. I only recommend this to Christians, but the only other better Christian movie I can think of is Unplanned. With all that build-up, all those characters, all those films, all of these things that they managed to do after 11 years, the payoff is so worth it. Avengers Endgame is pretty much a masterpiece. Although there are a few things that probably will bother some people, I think this is just the best MCU film possible, even possibly more than Winter Soldier. Watch it! I heard that the game that this movie was based on was mediocre. If that's true, I'm gonna have to say the same thing about this movie. While the Pokemon look fantastic, that's pretty much what I give. The characters are boring, the story's very predictable. Even Ryan Reynolds as Detective Pikachu couldn't save it. Sorry, I can only recommend it to fans. That's it. Despite what the critics are saying, I actually enjoyed this film. Yeah, it's kind of slow and the plot is kind of inconsistent at times. I do enjoy the character himself, how he grows up, his relationship with others, especially with his best friends at Edith. I just enjoy it so much, especially it feels like encouraging imagination and all that. I give it a watch, though it's up to you for you to decide if you like it or not. You know what to expect with John Wick. The action's great, the choreography's awesome, cinematography helps with it, the sound just makes it even sound more painful. Though I gotta admit, this movie is a slight downgrade compared to the other two because the story is not that interesting. I'm starting to get a little tired of John Wick's character, and I really am not much of a fan of the ending. Go watch it if you're a Wick fan, though. I'm kind of have to be a little hesitant when it comes to reviewing live action versions of Disney remakes because, well, they're remakes of classics. Are they going to be as good as the originals? In this one, not really, but it's still good. There's some problems, like some of the additions are pointless, and the guy who played Aladdin's not great, but it's an overall decent live action remake. Okay, I want to add a few things on the Aladdin review. Will Smith as Genie he did his best, even though I'm gonna miss the Robin Williams version. There's a subplot that involves a girl going to war with a country that we never see. Jasmine being a little ticked off that she doesn't contribute because reasons. And Aladdin and Jafar's actors are the worst. Although Jafar, I can tell he's trying. Aladdin, he's kind of weak. So yeah, still a decent movie, but needs work. This movie is absolutely dumb. The story's just not great, and the characters are just, the humans at least, are the most uninteresting people you would ever meet in cinema. And yet I still like this movie anyway, mainly because of one thing. The monsters, the monster fights, and the terror is just amazing. I would go to watch this movie for that alone, but I think I recommend it better if it just comes out on Blu-ray anyway. What a disappointing end to the X-Men franchise. The story and plot points just don't make any sense. There's plenty of plot holes. The continuity is bad as usual. Characters are just unbearable at worst and uninteresting at best. It's just a disappointing way to end the X-Men. All I'm just gonna say is, when are they gonna join the MCU? Here come the new members of the Men in Black. And they do not have any more interesting traits than the last group. They have potential, but it's ruined with the lack of good comedy, and the story's just not as interesting, especially with the inconsistency to the MIB lore. I guess if you haven't seen any of the previous ones or don't think too hard, you'll like it, but it still has flaws nonetheless. Go and watch this film. This film is fantastic. It's a great continuation to Toy Story 3, and it actually expands some of the character arcs for Woody and Bo Peep and some of the other characters, even the antagonist. I kind of wish they kind of used the other characters as well, but what we got is good enough. But this film's fantastic. Great story, great animation. Go watch it. A failed songwriter becomes popular after stealing songs from the Beatles when everyone in the world has forgotten about them. Sounds like a good idea for a film. And it is. It has some cliches and some predictable moments here and there, but overall it is an enjoyable film. I don't recommend you watch it, especially if you've been watching a lot of films about singers these days. We come to the end of the Phase 3 of the MCU with Spider-Man Far From Home. and it's just as good as its predecessor. There's some things that I like about it, like Mysterio is really cool, some of the visual effects are cool, and how Spider-Man is struggling to get a date with MJ. And while I kind of wish there's some things I wish they explored, it's an overall good follow-up to the Avengers Endgame, and a good way to end Phase 3. Can't just wait to see what Phase 4 is going to be. I have never seen any of the movies or of the TV series, but I have heard of Shaft. After watching this movie, it's flawed, but I enjoyed it more than I should have. I like the characters, I like the comedy, writing needs work, and I think I missed something in the movie that made me left confused, so take this as a grain of salt. Still, I enjoyed it nonetheless, so watch it if you have nothing else to watch. From what I can tell, you don't need to see the first movie because it has nothing to do with this one other than it involves drugs. That being said, I find it to be really entertaining with an interesting character arc for one of the main characters, an interesting moral dilemma, and an awesome last act with an awesome action scene. First act had some issues, but overall, it is enjoyable to watch this movie. Let's get this out of the way first. The graphics are beautiful, very lifelike, photorealistic. The environments, the animals look amazing. And that's it. The rest of the movie is pretty much as simple as this. Watch the original. There are plenty of issues with this one, particularly the pacing. Photorealism actually gets in the way, and it's just a whole pacing mess. Just watch the original. It's been a while since Tarantino has made another film, and this one, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, just as good as the other ones. It has great dialogue, very funny, and it does feel like the atmosphere is 1969 Hollywood. Some issues like there's some scenes and dialogue goes longer than needs to be, and one character that should have an important role but doesn't do much should be improved on. Other than that, this film is good. I honestly expected a little better for this movie. While the two leads are great and all, and the action's fine, there are issues like that banter with the two leads got really tiresome. The movie is clearly focuses more on the action scenes, and I just wasn't into what is happening because the story is just kind of boring. I describe this movie as pretty much straight to DVD with Hollywood quality. I wasn't expecting this movie to be amazing, but I did still come out disappointed. Dora herself is not bad, if a little bit annoying, and there are certain elements that I think is a good tribute to the cartoon, but the script has problems, the characters are annoying, especially this girl, and man is the villain an idiot yet somehow still outsmarts the characters. Kids and Dora fans will like it, but I don't want to see it again. Like the White Storm movie that I watched last month, you don't need to see the previous incarnations of this movie, The Line Walker. But unlike the White Storm movie, I don't think this is just as interesting because the characters are not as interesting and how they told its story is kind of rushed. The action scenes are still kind of cool, but I've seen a little better. I really don't have much to say about this movie. It's just like any other typical Christian movie ever. It's okay, Christians will like it, but it still has its issues like the writing, some of the acting is pretty bad. There are some cool things like there's one lesson on how you describe yourself, but overall, I can only recommend this to Christians, nothing more. Ugh, what is this? The third Chinese movie I watched in the past 3 months? Well, in any case, this movie is actually not too bad. A good drama about 3 sisters who have to deal with their own parental figures. The writing is not bad, and the drama actually gets pretty emotional at times. Writing needs some improvement, and 2 characters are not needed, and they need to work on certain transitions, but overall, not a bad movie to watch. While not as good as the other Rambo movies, this one is just as entertaining. It is very brutal, just like the last movie, and Sylvester Stallone still has what it takes to be John Rambo. There's some problems with the story. The antagonists are not interesting, as well as a few side characters. But overall, a decent action movie all the same. Joker is one of the darkest, most morose, uncomfortable films to watch. And I love it. Arthur Fleck's downward spiral to becoming Joker is believable and amazing. Not to mention Joaquin Phoenix himself is such an amazing actor playing the role. Plenty more things I could say about it, but I don't have much time. All I can say is go watch it. It is a great addition to the DC films in general. Okay, before I get to the review of this movie, interesting story. When I was getting to the theaters, there's this Japanese woman who was offering this movie Immortal Hero because she was offering it for free, and she even goes as far to say it's actually a Christian movie, which, okay, for one thing, it's free, and that sounds cool. But what is it actually? Let me get to that in the next part. After watching the movie, it says right over here that it's based on a true story, and I thought, okay, how is this based on a true story? Looking it up, it is based off of this guy. His name is Ryo Okawa, and apparently he is the CEO and founder of the Happy Science religious organization. So I watched a movie about a guy who made a cult. As for the movie, well, man, this movie's not good. The acting is pretty bad. Even for a foreign movie, I can tell the acting is bad. The writing is very poor, actually, and the message it's trying to send is very questionable and really weird how it's delivered, especially when they try to do supernatural stuff that doesn't really fit for this movie, despite it's supposed to be spiritual. Ugh, some immortal hero. You ever want to watch a film of what happened after the creation of the light bulb? Well, this is the answer. The current war, the competition of how someone would patent the light bulb and see who would make the best one out there in America. And it's really good. I kind of wish there were some things improved, like I wish Nikola Tesla had a bigger role, and I feel like you need to know a little bit of history to enjoy this, but this is a great film overall. What is this? I mean, it's cool to see Linda Hamilton and Arnold Schwarzenegger come back for their respective roles, and the new Terminator is kind of cool, but none of the new characters are interesting. This movie's a rehash of the first and second movies, and it's just insulting into the original two as a whole, especially how the movie starts out and how it ends. Just don't watch it. It sucks. Holy moly. This is one of the best films I've seen this year. I don't want to say much because I'd rather if you just go in not knowing much. Other than this poor family takes advantage of being hired by a rich family, not knowing that any of the family members are related. That concept alone is interesting. Watch the film. It's really good. Coming from a guy who absolutely loved the first Frozen, its sequel, it's alright. The characters are still likable despite being not as interesting. The story has its issues, especially by the third act. The songs are also good, but not all of them land the mark. If you love Frozen, this one will do fine, but it could have had some improvements. I like me a good mystery film. Is Knives Out a good one? I say it is. It does something interesting near the end of the first act because, well, I can't spoil what it is, but it holds my attention to the film long enough to see what happens near the end. Though I'm kind of disappointed how it does end. But it is a great film to watch, and I do recommend seeing it, especially if you're a fan of mystery. I love Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle. It was a fun movie despite being not as serious or dramatic as the first one. The next level is just as good, though it does repeat a few things as the last one, and there is a lost opportunity that should have been the movie, whereas the game, they should have done something with a broken game. Despite that, if you like Welcome to the Jungle, you're gonna like the next level. So, this is how you're gonna end the Star Wars saga. This is just disappointing to an extreme level. They clearly are trying to retcon the events of The Last Jedi, and they did it so sloppily, and the writing is poor. The characters, I want to like them, but I just can't because they're so poorly done. This is just pathetic. Keep in mind, I have not seen any of the previous Ip Man movies, but from what I've seen, it's not bad. The last one, it has great fight choreography, one pretty good subplot, and the antagonists are freaking powerhouses, but man, are they stereotypically racist. It's just kind of funny. And there are other couple issues I have, but overall, not a bad movie, and probably a good way to end the series. Catching up to some of the films I missed this year, here is Jojo Rabbit. And I really love it. The Nazis and Adolf Hitler are just hilarious. The characters and actors are very good. And while the story has been done before, I do like how the Nazi Germany has been depicted in a satirical way. If you don't have anything else to watch, Jojo Rabbit's good here. Another film I'm catching up right now, Little Women. It's not really too bad at all. It's actually pretty good. Though it does have issues of jumping up from present day to flashback, it's a little jarring, and the fact that there's a little too many characters for me to follow to actually care. Over until the midpoint, I actually started to care, and this is where the story starts to get gripping. If you have nothing else to watch, this coming-of-age period piece will do just fine. This film is just heart-wrenching to watch, and I love it. It's the fact that Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson delivers one of the best performances I've seen. This film shows both sides of a divorce that are clearly both of their faults, and you honestly don't know if you want to get them back together or they should remain separated. Watch it if you can handle it. Just wow. This film is fantastic. Fantastic cinematography, very tense scenes. A majority of the film is just really intense, and it's just, this is something fantastic coming from a World War film, and by the director of Skyfall, no less. Go watch it. It's amazing. This one was nominated for Best Picture. This one is not too bad. I like the how they explore the car industry, particularly Ford and Ferrari, and how the two main leads have to deal with it, especially Ken Miles with his pride. That being said, I didn't love it. The first act goes on for way too long. There's something they didn't show, and I admit I'm not a car expert, so some of these just pass on by. Oh my word, really? Really? I'm sorry, Robert Downey Jr. Despite how much you're trying to save this movie, you can't. The pacing, the writing, the characters, they're just all awful. Nothing is interesting about this movie. Everything is kind of generic at best and just bad at worst. Don't watch it. Maybe watch the Eddie Murphy versions. If you really love the Bad Boys franchise, then I'm willing to bet you're going to like this one too. It's not going to blow anybody's minds away, but it still has what the other Bad Boys movies have what is good. Will Smith and Martin Lawrence as a great duo, and the hardcore action scenes that are competent, unlike certain other Michael Bay films that he made these days. Go watch it. This movie's okay. It's just pretty typical crime, action, comedy, drama. The comedy is what helps this movie and this guy right here. But ultimately, I'm not going to remember much about it. Maybe you'll have absolutely nothing else to watch. This, I guess, will do just fine, but there are better movies. While this may not be my favorite nominated Best Picture film of 2019, I could see why it was nominated. The story of how this Irishman's rise and fall to fame is just depressing, especially through his character journey. And The overall story is just impressive, especially with Martin Scorsese helming in this film. Wish it was shorter, but still fantastic.
This film really makes me want to watch more of Makoto Shinkai's work because this film is just great. The animation is beautiful, especially with the anything related to rain. The characters are great, and this story, I really like it, even though I'm not a fan of the ending. If you love Shinkai's work or just anime in general, just watch this. It may make you a fan even.
That is one really long title.
But to the review, Harley Quinn surely does stand out in this movie.
And that's the problem. She's the only one that stands out. All the other characters, all the other members of Birds of Prey are forgettable. Even Black Mask is kind of forgettable, even though Ewan McGregor really hands it up. So yeah, the only saving grace is her, but even then, the story's not that great. Though I'm not going to forgive how they depict Cassandra Cain. Sonic is the fastest thing alive, as so he claims. And he could add to being a pretty good movie for this, because this movie's actually not bad. Sonic and Jim Carrey as Dr. Robotnik are the clear standouts for the movie, and there's a lot of good fan service for this movie for me to be enjoyable for Sonic fans in general. That being said, many of the jokes don't land, and the story is pretty predictable, but overall, not bad. Not bad at all. I always wanted to see an Invisible Man movie would be like in this current year, and I kind of liked it. It is very thrilling, very suspenseful, has a great leading actress, and it's enjoyable to watch, though I do have a problem with the third act and its twist. Despite that, go watch it. It's very creatively creepy. Onward to another Pixar film. Sorry. Anyways, this film is not too bad, but there are some issues. For a film that takes place on a magical world with magical creatures in modern times, it doesn't really take advantage of it with it. Also, it's kind of cliched and predictable at times. Still, Chris Pratt and Tom Holland are the best things about this film, so take it as you will. I finally managed to watch all 7 seasons of Star Wars The Clone Wars. And man, is this show awesome. A must-see for Star Wars fans. This is no simple cartoon. It has great animation, great characters, great story arcs. It goes to the point where sometimes it gets really dark and eerie, and it raises up some questions in the not only in the Star Wars universe. Go watch it if you're a Star Wars fan. I am stuck in the middle of quarantine, and this is the first movie I haven't reviewed for quite a while. And this is what I get? This movie is awful! None of the characters that are interesting, and especially this non-acting little kid here. The story's nonsensical. The world, you've seen it many times, and there's nothing good about it other than maybe the cinematography. Nothing's gonna save this movie, though. After watching Star Wars The Clone Wars, I might as well watch its continuation, which is Star Wars Rebels. And I think it's fine. It is aimed more towards children, which would be okay if the story was just at least as good as Clone Wars, which not really. There are not many standout episodes. The characters are alright. The Empire can be really incompetent at times, but overall, it's a decent watch. About time I got to review movies again, hopefully after all this. And starting with Mulan, the live action version. Is it as good as I hope it is? Unfortunately, no. None of the characters are interesting. The story is just paced too quickly. I don't remember most of the characters at all, and even the editing just ruins the fight scenes. Just watch the animated version, man. I have seen this anime twice, once in Japanese and once in English. And while the English cast did a great job, and there's some things that they expanded upon that is interesting, this anime is still a mess. It's the writing is poor, the pacing is way too rushed, the animation kind of sucks, and even the main character is boring despite actually speaking. Just play the games, they're much better. It's kind of a shame that this show only lasted 2 seasons, because I really enjoy it. I love the characters, especially Peggy Carter and Edwin Jarvis when they work together. The world of 1940s America, I'm always a sucker for that. And it has some connections to the MCU, even if though some of the plot has been left hanging due to its cancellation. I say go watch it, especially if you're a fan of the MCU. After finally watching a film in movie theaters, the first film I get to watch is Tenet, and I really do like it. The effects are great. The concept behind it is really executed well, and as per usual by Christopher Nolan, this production is great. I do am confused in some areas that it feels like I need to rewatch it, but overall, Tenet is a joy to watch. After this movie got delayed 4 times already, does it leave a good impact to the end of the X-Men film universe? No, not really. None of the characters are interesting. The story's just lackluster, and for a horror movie, I did not find it scary at all. If there's one good thing about it, it's at least better than Dark Phoenix. This is the second iteration of the Feng Sheng cinematic universe from China. Yes, really. Never saw the first one, but from what I've seen in this one, I thought it was fine. The animation's great, the world looks interesting, even though I have a hard time understanding it. And the writing may have some issues, and I figured this movie has a bit of a Deus Ex Machina, but despite that, I give this movie a watch if there's not really much new movies coming out this year anyway. That's all I gotta say about this movie. Robert De Niro was pretty good as the grandpa, and some of the traps were not bad as well, but the story is so cliched and predictable, and the ending just hurts this movie overall. I guess if you don't have anything else to watch, this is fine, but there are better family movies than this. This movie has some potential to being interesting, with a premise of an honest thief having redemption, but is interfered by 2 corrupt FBI agents. One of them who has a guilty conscience. That seems kind of interesting, but unfortunately with some sloppy writing and weird editing, along with a lame antagonist and Liam Neeson's poor acting, that opportunity seems to be wasted here. I only watched one Lupin movie, The Castle Cagliostro, I believe that's how you say it, and I thought it was fine. And this movie is fine too. I like the characters, the animation's awesome, and I do like the setting. However, many of the recurring main characters don't have a reason being there. I watched this in English, and it does not sync with the Japanese mouths, and it is very predictable, but it's still a fun movie nonetheless. Wonder Woman finally returns to the big screen, or rather the small screen on a TV. And what a massive disappointment. The plot is nonsensical, the characters are boring, there are plenty of plot holes, the action and the editing are sloppy. This was not a good movie. It has some good moments here and there, but jeez, this is not a good sequel. If you want a film that will end this awful year in a good way, watch this film. This film is awesome. This has a great story, even though it's a little predictable at times. A great message and fantastic animations per usual, especially in the afterlife areas. It's just a great Pixar film, as per great Pixar film as usually are. Go watch it. What a great film this is. I mean, for a film that's discussing about controversial topic like school shootings, it's done very well. And not to mention with a great hero, very suspenseful moments and thrills. I consider this what I call this year's version of Die Hard. I recommend you watch this film. It's awesome. With an animated live-action hybrid movie like Tom and Jerry, do you think this movie has what it takes to show these duo on the big screen? Have you seen A Bug's Life? How to Train Your Dragon? Chicken Run? You kind of don't know what to expect from this one. This is boring despite great animation. Most of the characters are uninteresting other than the main antagonist. And it's also really predictable. Just watch the cartoons. The first MCU television show to ever be made, not to confuse with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Agent Carter and other Marvel television shows. The show's actually really good. Sure, there are aspects like the big baddie's kind of obvious, the sitcom needs work, and AJ Hayward is the worst character in this show. But it's actually really good with great writing, mystery, and two lead characters, Wanda and Vision. Especially Wanda. Go watch it. Especially if you're a fan of the MCU. Joss Whedon's Justice League was just okay, but that is not good enough for a superhero crossover film. Zack Snyder's version, on the other hand, is really good. All the characters get their time to shine, especially Cyborg. The Steppenwolf is actually intimidating, and they fixed a lot of things compared to Joss Whedon's version. There are some weak areas, like Aquaman is clearly the weakest character of the bunch, and I don't like the foreshadowings, but overall, great improvement. You want a fight between Godzilla vs. Kong after 7 years of a MonsterVerse? You're gonna get it here. The fight scenes are just awesome, brutal, great CG overall. Now, it does have the similar issues of past MonsterVerse films, like the human characters are not interesting, their arcs are not interesting. Anything involving the humans are just not interesting. And some conveniences here and there, but if you want that fight, you're gonna get it here. Before WandaVision and the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, there is this show called Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. That's the first Marvel television show. And while it's nice to see Phil Coulson again, some characters are good at times, and the writing can be really good at some areas. It's ultimately not worth it because there's a lot of cliches, some ideas are potentially wasted, and it's very cliched and can be really stupid. If you're willing to forgive it, you can watch it, but I don't recommend it. With this show, I guess you could say that Falcon and the Winter Soldier have a great chemistry. Some of the interesting topics that brings up in the MCU and some of the arcs are nice. But overall, I think the issues are that Falcon is not that interesting due to his arc and his characteristics. Carly's not that interesting of a villain. And I think it can be a little preachy. If you want to watch it, go ahead. But I think you'll end up missing Steve Rogers more. You want a violent and gory movie like it did in the video games? Then Mortal Kombat has plenty of fight scenes that has a lot of the violence you wanted ever since the 1995 movie. That being said, the pacing goes by way too quickly for me to care about any of the characters at all. Cole Young is just not a very interesting lead, and the fan service is the only thing that brings this movie together. I can only recommend fans of the video games, not any casuals though. What is this? What is this? This show is freaking awful. Other than Black Bolt and Maximus as actors, there's nothing redeemable about it. There's the acting, it can be bad. The acting, directing, the production, post-production, the writing, everything about this show is freaking terrible. I don't know. This was originally going to be an MCU film too? Ugh, just skip it. You ever play those JRPGs which last like 30 to 100 hours and they made like a TV show that only had like a few episodes out of it? This is what I got with Raya the Last Dragon. It looks good like Disney standards with some fight scenes and interesting world, but the problem is that the pacing goes by so quickly for me to care about the characters, and the theme of trust is just done so poorly. This is just not great. Here's the premise of this movie. A crime lord just lost his son by a bunch of robbers, and he wants to find those robbers by joining the armory division as the different identity. Does that interest you? Well, basically this movie's just okay. If that premise interested you, that's good, but it doesn't really stand out that much. I don't really have much to say. I'm sorry. That's what it does to me. I'll be honest, when it comes to the Saw series, They're my big guilty pleasure movies, and Spiral is no exception to this. I like it. But if I had to be critical, it does suffer some issues from the previous Saw movies, like the main characters are kind of stupid, although to be fair, they're kind of smarter here. The killer keeps outsmarting him despite how much resources he somehow has, and hell, he could have been caught, but still, not that great. Emma Stone as Cruella de Vil is great in it, and her chemistry with Horace and Jasper is also fantastic. I really like these characters. That being said, the one thing that really bothers me is the messages that this movie is touting out. This seems like something that is meant for older audiences instead of families and children. I recommend it for 101 Dalmatians fans and Disney fans, but not younger audiences.